It's Flash o'clock.
Do you know where your mother is?
She was murdered.
I'm former movie trivia schmodown singles champion Marisol McKee, aka Lady Justice.
And I'm former movie trivia schmodown singles champion Adam the Coyote Collins. Really excited to discuss a movie again. Yeah. It's long overdue.
Yeah.
And we got one today. It's got a lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah, we got a biggie. Look, there's a lot of speedsters out there. We know Quicksilver.
Mm-hmm.
You know Dash Parr.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Speedy
Gonzalez.
I think throughout time, the most famous one, the most recognizable, is the guy in the red suit. It's about time he got a movie.
To be fair to The Flash, he's had live action representation for a while, the 90s TV show, and then, the more recent television show, which I watched a little bit of with Grant Gustin, and it has its fans, and obviously it turned into a big sprawling narrative with multiple tie-ins. I know that at one point Ezra Miller crossed over into that too, so being honest, I grew up loving comics from both DC and Marvel, but I always had that soft spot for the Super Friends, the Justice League. I grew up watching the classic Super Friends TV show from the 60s. And that's when I started to wrap my head around the idea that, he and Superman race, and if he wants to, he can punch someone really hard because he's the Flash. But, how does he control that? Who does he punch? Because he's not a particularly violent superhero.
And I watched a lot of WB-17 growing up. And guess what? They own DC. So I watched a lot of Superman, the animated series, Batman, the animated series. I got fed a lot of that growing up. So that's my home base.
The Square Jaw universe.
This is the 13th entry in the DCEU. And Flash is finally getting his movie. We got a taste him in 13th.
Whew.
Yeah.
Okay.
For anybody who's keeping track, because I'm certainly not. I just appreciate these movies when they show up. I've always thought that DC's biggest strength is that they're not the MCU, that they don't have this pressure to always connect things in a neat assembly line the way the MCU juggernaut has done. An impressive feat, but that's also daunting to duplicate.
One size does not fit all when it comes to comic book adaptations. I think the 90s taught us that. I think the 2000s taught us that. And I think DC is returning us, maybe not in a straight line, but I think they're kind of returning us to a tradition of having different styles of comic book movies from the same source material in certain cases being released at the same time. That should be normalized. I don't think you can talk exclusively about the interconnected DC movies and ignore the ones that stand apart. And I think you need to learn from the ones that stand apart.
People just want to act like Joker didn't exist or last year's The Batman didn't exist. We're capable of making very popular, well-received films with these characters that don't need to have anything necessarily to tie into other films.
There are a lot of things going on at Warner Brothers right now that I do find troubling. And it's not because I don't like DC stuff. It's quite the opposite. I think it's a disservice to movies like The Flash and others. The fact that we probably won't see Batgirl is honestly a crime to me. Because I want to see these Elseworld type stories. I want to see them return to the mainstream. We need more variety when it comes to comic book adaptations, because without it, that's what really hurts the genre, is homogeneity.
Yeah, so we finally have a movie about the Flash.
Mostly.
Yeah, mostly.
There's a lot of people in this movie. Really like how I felt going into this movie. I was genuinely excited in the way I was when I went to go see, Batman Forever in theaters in the 90s.
2023's Flash takes off based on more recent and very popular story from Flash Comics called Flashpoint.
Very popular with the kids.
It's been contextualized within the DCEU, takes place roughly about 10 years after the events of Man of Steel.
So do I.
Barry's now in his mid to late 20s. He's working as a forensic analyst, and he stumbles upon a realization that he can go back in time and prevent his mother's murder. His mom was murdered in a home invasion when he was 18. And he now realizes that he has the power to go back and change the course of history, change the events, clear his father's name, and make sure that none of this ever happened.
He's not simply trying to get justice for his father for being recast between movies.
I know. Justice for Billy Crudup.
Okay. To be fair, I like Billy Crudup and Ron Livingston. I would hang out with both of those guys.
I mean, if I looked at the two, and if I looked at Ron Livingston and I looked at Billy Crudup, I'm like, Ron Livingston's definitely the one who killed his wife.
Can you imagine Ron Livingston, Dr. Manhattan?
Dr. Manhattan wouldn't do shit. You were Ron Livingston. Be wearing a Hawaiian shirt, still no draws. I was quite pleased coming out of The Flash. I recognize it as being a movie with some visible flaws, but its flaws were not for lack of trying. Mm-hmm. They were going for it with everything in this movie. This film has been in production for over a decade. This story, this whole arc has been worked around in so many ways, and that, for better or worse, is evident in the final product. Within this universe, we've seen some pretty serious takes, whether it's Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman. We've seen some uplifting takes where it comes to Wonder Woman. And then we've seen some decidedly more really comic booky, really fun takes via Aquaman and Shazam's origin movies. And I think that The Flash fits firmly, comfortably in the more upbeat. Andy Muschietti sets the tone for what you're going to see throughout this whole film. He injects breakneck opening scene where we're seeing everything that the Flash can do, everything he does do on the regular, including a quite hysterical rescue where a skyscraper is being shaken and a bunch of babies and a dog and a nurse are falling to their death unless that he saves them. And this is just, like I said, this sets the tone for the movie. It's got a lot of very colorful, very cartoony, very screwball special effects in there. Mm-hmm. It made me laugh. It made me gasp and laugh because of the levity of it.
There's been a lot of hay made over the visual effects in this movie because it's low-hanging fruit, I'll be honest. At this point, with Andy Muschietti specifically, I'm kind of on his wavelength, for better or worse, when it comes to visual effects and CGI. Mama and It. He gets very cartoony at moments, and it either is going to work for people or it doesn't. I feel like he felt even more licensed when it comes to a comic book movie to get a little rubbery. The Speed Force visualization was more of that kind of cartoony effect of like having fully animated people. In this case, Muschietti was treating CG like animation. In his mind, I'm sure like he's just being creative. He's animating. But the problem with mainstream audiences and most of us in general is we look at CG and we assume they're attempting pure fidelity. And if it's anything less than that, it's trash, it's garbage, it's offensive.
Regardless of like the time constraints, which I'm sure there were with the special effects, I also don't think the aim of the special effects, particularly with people and living beings in this, was photorealism. I've loved the visualization of Barry Allen of the Flash when he is in motion and everything about it. Yeah. Oh yeah, just the fluidity of it, like he's swimming on land.
Very cool.
And this movie just continues that. It just takes it and runs with it, pardon the pun.
Honestly, the thing that was so liberating about watching The Flash, and this is why I brought up the babies as well, is because that scene with the babies kind of liberated me. It kind of just cut me loose. Mm-hmm. And so like anything else that happened in the movie, it wasn't that I was lowering my standards. It was that I was relaxed.
I could fix things. You could also destroy everything. This can't be happening. I completely broke the universe.
So once the Flash discovers that he can essentially go back in time, he goes back to what, around the time Man of Steel originally happened and encounters his 18-year-old self. I like where they frame the story in this movie because we like Man of Steel in this household. We're fans. And we're not here to debate the merits of that movie necessarily. But like, for me personally, that was a flashpoint in my own life when it comes to comic book storytelling. I think it's a very important inflection point. Like, forgive the reference, Order 66 in Star Wars. I think the Zod battle in Metropolis is a point we keep revisiting because of the in-story narrative and the extra narrative outside the story. At this point in the story, we've seen the long-term impact of Zod's visit, that fight, Superman's arrival.
Yeah, it matters. Mm-hmm. It's not arbitrary. This is a glue that has been holding the whole DCEU together. If this is one of the final farewells of this era of DC films, it is really fitting that we come back not only full circle with this, but kind of tie in a bunch of lore and a bunch of DC properties we love all together.
Oh, shit. This is mad trippy. Dude, this is catastrophic.
I really enjoy Ezra Miller in this movie. I really do. Both of them.
The high school age Flash and the somewhat jaded 20s Flash interacting with each other like siblings. Really great dynamic and a wonderful opportunity for an actor to just stretch their chops.
A great chance and done really well. Have to give the movie credit for this. Both of the Barry Allens in this film have an arc.
Yeah.
They both and they have different arcs. Their relationship with each other grows throughout the film. And I think that Ezra does a great job of delivering the humor, the foolishness, the boyishness, the how annoying Barry can be, but still maintaining the likability, and also lets the drama that really hit. Ezra has always been a strong dramatic actor from a young age.
It's a great chance to essentially take the character of the Flash and Barry Allen to task for the representation of Barry Allen thus far. And what I mean by that is when we met Barry Allen proper in Justice League and got a sense for Barry's, kind of high maintenance level personality, high functioning personality, hyperactivity, whatever you want to call it. It's fun to see it manifested in this movie where older Barry has to be the elder statesman, has to take his younger self to task. It's very obvious that he keyed into working with Ezra in a very specific way so you could get both of these performances. And I got to say, it didn't wear me out. I laughed, or I was at least smirking most of the time those two Barrys were interacting.
And it really is his time to shine while also being connective tissue and bringing in a lot of DC characters that we love and from different eras.
It's a big selling point of the movie. And we'd heard that Michael Keaton was coming back for this and Batgirl, which sadly we'll never see. But I love the idea of bringing people back. And this isn't exclusive to DC. We've seen it with Marvel as well. And being able to catch up with the character at this point in his life. We have to kind of fill in the gaps. And obviously this is a point in time where Gotham is a little bit brighter and a little less troubled than it used to be. The circumstances, admittedly, are a bit absurd. I'll be honest, for me, just a bit contrived, but it has to be when it comes to multiverse stories, let's be honest. Multiverse stories are inherently contrived. That's not good or bad. It's just, if we want to mess with that premise, that's part of it. That said, what I love about this, he is steadfast, low-key, and Keaton. He sells me on it because he's so chill and he's so confident in what's happening. And then when he does the exposition on the multiverse to both Flashes, it's hilarious because I've seen this explained in a bunch of movies, but because it's Michael Keaton's Batman and there's really no reason he should be the genius about this particular topic, he just is.
He didn't quite have his own journey. There wasn't a point A to B that Batman needed to go through at this point in the movie. He was there to just help Barry Allen solve his problem, but Michael Keaton does elevate that. The film keeps it all together. It's not distracting.
It's because he doesn't oversell it. And
yeah.
I think the inclusion of Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne and Batman in this was a good choice because I think we needed that reminder. There are different shades of the characters of Batman and Bruce Wayne. Shout out to Ben Affleck in this movie because not only was it cool to get his version of Batman back, but his action sequence, solid, clear, fun to watch. And the other thing that I liked about it is that he and Barry got to have a moment together, a downbeat moment where they could have a nice brief discussion and a good follow-up to their interaction in Justice League. When Barry goes into this alternate timeline and runs into this other version of Bruce Wayne, he has his familiarity with the other version of Bruce. And he carries his confidence in Bruce's character into his interaction with this new Bruce Wayne that he has no point of reference from. Barry's belief in Bruce's character is what, for me, sold Bruce on stepping up again.
We've now entered this alternate reality where instead of having Superman, we have Supergirl. And she establishes right away that she's quite different from Kal-El.
First of all, Sasha Calle does so much with very little dialogue. She doesn't have a whole lot of lines in this compared to a lot of the other characters. A lot of moody stares, a lot of lingering moments. and a lot of violence. I love the violence. I gotta be honest. Supergirl has cause to be a little pissed off when it comes to this movie. And it's not what we're seeing in things like The Boys and Invincible and Brightburn, where it's like super being is just trying to hurt people for the sake of hurting people. She has cause to be violent. And I feel the emotion of that violence in this movie.
Her character suffers from obviously not having enough time to really flesh it out and flesh her story out, but it's also not her movie. So understandable. Right. But they set up with Supergirl that made me hungry to see a Supergirl movie featuring Sasha Calle. Because the character of Barry Allen in the DCU is the equivalent of trying to catch up with an already moving train and jump on, he doesn't have an origin film, really. So that comes with frayed narrative edges, those incomplete narratives. For example, Iris West, a non-character character in this movie. Kiersey Clemons shows up. It's a little weird why she's there. You don't really get a sense of their relationship in the exchange of dialogue.
She's established so that if we ever need to bring her back, we can.
Sure.
That's cool. But what I was intrigued more by was the implied feelings that younger Barry was developing towards Supergirl, because I picked up on that a lot. Not as specifically romantic, but as very passionate, very emotionally motivated. He cares deeply about this person. I think it'd be believable that especially the younger version of Barry would be quite taken with her under the circumstances and care about her well-being. I think there was probably a version of this movie where maybe it was an unrequited romance. I don't think Supergirl was here for a romance. I don't think she had her own problems.
She ain't got time for that.
My point is some good nonverbal acting on Ezra and Sasha's part. Good on them.
Another big plus is the score. Benjamin Wallfish. This is the first time I looked up this guy's name coming out of a movie. I was like, who did the score for this? Because the energy is just there. And he's been working for a good amount. He did Blade Runner 49. He's worked with Muschietti. He did the It movies. He's done Shazam. He's done the new Mortal Kombat. He's done The Invisible Man. Lee Whannell's The Invisible Man. He's been working. Guy's been working. The score was great in this. So bombastic, so energetic.
Wallfish had access to the entire DC repertoire. So, we've got John Williams, we've got Danny Elfman, we've got Hans Zimmer. Everyone's getting mixed in here. And I will say
his
this.
Flash music, he incorporates the classic themes, but also his Flash themes really do stand out on his own. His original stuff
They
really
do
does stand out.
There were moments where the pop music was really fun, but there were a couple moments where the pop songs could have just been dropped entirely, and it would have been fine. But I get it. I would have trouble resisting too if I had Keys to the Castle.
There was too much juicy stuff to go in here to keep this completely spoiler free. So let's get into some spoiler talk real quick for just a second, because we got thoughts. So this is pretty much just going to be about the Easter eggs and specific third act plot stuff that worked or didn't work in the movie for us.
So if you haven't seen the movie and you're watching this review and you care about spoilers, watch the movie and then watch this part.
One of the things that didn't work for me, again, most of these things are just going to be a result of their not being enough movie. As much of a good emotional focus as they put on the emotional investment of Barry wanting to save his mother, they also didn't kind of have any time to go into the mystery of who actually killed her and how we can actually stop that person. And I think the script just made a choice to just make it be no, we don't have time for that. So we just got to make it the focus that he just has to stop her death, which is only odd because if they were going to make another one of these, that would have been the perfect time to introduce Reverse Flash.
I definitely felt that was conspicuous as well. And this is where I, as someone who watched at least a good amount of the show, felt like Warner Brothers was getting too in their heads about what has been represented and what hasn't. What I like with DC is when they let go of that stuff and they just make a movie. One of the good things about them trying to be counteractive to the style of the show was reorienting the origin of the Flash and giving us an opportunity to see it from a different point of view. What I felt was them trying too hard to avoid conflict was completely ignoring the nature of his mother's death.
And instead they kind of just retrofitted the focus on this can of tomatoes.
Other than
putting it on the responsibility of the murderee to just prevent their own murder. Mom, if you just didn't forget the tomatoes, okay, you'd be alive.
Look, I'm not mad at Michael Shannon. He appeared in this movie. He existed.
Got that paycheck.
He definitely got paid. I've never seen someone so apathetic about getting punched in the face in my entire life. And I get that the character was playing a long game. That's cool. But I also think it's reflective of the fact that Michael Shannon doesn't even know what's happening in these movies.
He might not have even been there.
Yeah. I feel like he's been asked specifically about General Zod, and he's like, who is General Zod? I like that General Zod came back visually.
Yes.
But I'll be honest, I didn't feel the presence of the character in any real sense.
No, and that was a choice. It was a deliberate choice to just strip Zod to his physical menace. The villain was time, like just the problem.
The villain
solving.
was Barry Allen.
Yeah, just trying to solve his problem, and I respect that decision. Again, something that kept it from getting too overcrowded, and it trimmed the fat in spots where it really needed to. Again, to a fault sometimes with some people's storylines. Case in point, both Supergirl and Batman meet their end in this film. Rather unceremoniously, I think, for both of them. It's the trouble with some of these multiverse narratives is when you lose kind of a sense of finality with some of the characters, because we're admitting that they're just part of a whole, and they are just an alternate timeline. And that leads to us watching Supergirl get stabbed and killed about like 3 or 4 times in succession, which hurt a little bit. And that's the last time we ever see Sasha Calle. That's the last time we see that character in the film. Same thing for Keaton's Batman.
Yeah.
Tying into what we were saying, that because there wasn't a unique sense of purpose and drive for Keaton's Batman in this film, I think it felt a little contrived to have him just insist on fighting and taking on Kryptonian Gort there at the end. I was like, well, this is only going to end one way. Why is he taking out the biggest guy? If you were going to have Batman pass, it could have been a more noble or more meaningful death if you were going to have it, and something a little more tied directly to helping the Flash directly.
What did you do?
When I see their fate play out, I agree with you. My gut reaction is sadness and disappointment. But what I understand from a narrative level is the idea of fatalism. I like the idea that the Flash has set action in motion that he needs to ultimately learn from. That entire final battle is way too broadly lit, although there's some cool moments in it. It's not without some cool moments. For them to reiterate over and over that Batman and Supergirl are doomed in this particular scenario is to drive home the idea that the Flash has done something irreparable. Yes, Barry's mother is alive, but at what cost? And
that's a lesson that he learns.
Yes. Though. I think what the movie could have done to have its cake and eat it too is bring those characters back at the end in this updated version of the world. Because what Barry ultimately ends up doing is he does make a change so that his father is let off the hook. So that is him messing with fate yet again. The moment at the end where George Clooney shows up as Bruce Wayne rings hollow as hell.
Woo! Talk about a whoopee cushion of an ending. Yes, after the end of this harrowing emotional journey, and you figure out that you get the worst Batman from the worst Batman movie.
The most disengaged Batman. Let me put it like
the worst Batman.
We spent the whole movie with Michael Keaton's version of the character, and if he had walked on at the end, that would have had a lot more impact for me. And you still could kill him in another version of whatever movie.
Sure. What an interesting surprise when Flash was in the Speed Force in the big finale of this movie, and we're seeing all the iterations of Superman over the years. Mixed bag. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. I think the ways that they went about it was no bueno for me on the whole. I don't like it back in Rogue One when they did it to poor little Peter Cushing. But I am really not a big fan of reviving deceased actors with CGI, with AI, with all of that stuff. And I think that there's so many alternatives to that. And
just use stock footage.
Just use stock footage, man. It ain't that difficult.
Same purpose, and it looks better. Either way, it didn't add much to the movie.
It didn't. It just was fun. It just was like I'll be damned, they did it.
I just hope Helen Slater got paid, because, like, did anyone reach out to her?
With Who's Running Warner Brothers? Probably not. Nick Cage showing up, he did film that for his scene. He did film some kind
Like
of
motion
mocap.
capture?
Yeah, he did some mocap for that.
Yeah.
Of the Burton Superman that never was. It lived in this movie, and that was just like a what? But fun moment. And then you move on.
John Schnepp actually signed my cup.
Nice.
Yeah. Warner Brothers never would have gone for it.
What's that?
If you had just ditched like the CG Speed Force and the CG flat like flashbacks and just done full on animation. Like if you had done hand drawn animation for Christopher Reeve, that would have been cool. Yeah. That would have honored the spirit of the character. Bringing back Christopher Reeve was something they went out of their way to do that was ultimately awkward, and it was easily avoidable. I'm not here to write off the entire movie because of a weird moment.
It was 6 seconds.
Yeah. As far as the movie that we got, I had fun. I was smiling. We were laughing out loud.
Oh, yeah.
I ate all the popcorn. I ate all the Nerds clusters.
All of them. I cried when Wonder Woman shows up because that's what I do. I realize she's tied intrinsically, I guess, to my hormones, because whenever I see Gal Gadot show up as Wonder Woman, I cry. No, especially knowing that this is probably the last time I'm ever going to see her.
I will say it would have been nice to see the old Batmobile in action. Just seeing it sit there.
No, we're dealing with flying aliens in this.
I get it.
It was time for the Batwing.
Look, I'm just saying he could have gone to the library and checked out a book in the Batmobile. It would have been cool to see the wheels spin. That's all I'm trying to say.
I'm worried about you. So we're getting around to this review after The Flash has been out for a couple weekends. For many, many reasons, Flash is underperforming at the box office. There's very little oxygen and wiggle room to be successful in a loaded summer lineup.
The real life situation of Ezra Miller, the only reason I even bring it up is because the reality is Ezra Miller is very unlikely to play this character again under the circumstances. I would be surprised. Just from a corporate standpoint, they want to rebrand the entire universe. Ezra comes with a lot of admitted baggage.
Yeah, I mean, if that were the case and they were planning on making more of these, and this movie had come out more successful out the gate, yeah, they just would replace them and hire a different Flash and just keep moving.
This movie, I think, from the past, present, and the future, was just getting smushed. And I don't think there was really a whole lot of places for the Flash to go from here in this iteration. I do appreciate that Muschietti tried to thread the needle, but I do think the reality of the corporation at work here is that the movie couldn't fully thrive on its own terms.
That is unfortunate, but I'm really happy it exists. I was really happy that we saw it. Messiness and all, I really enjoyed it. And I felt satisfied as a DC fan. And it came together where it didn't take itself too seriously in the hands of Muschietti, but it took the lore and the history of these characters seriously. And I genuinely feel sad that we're going to move towards a point within this franchise where we feel the need to erase and reset everything that's come before, because there are a lot of good elements here.
I just hope that they don't completely write off a lot of the great nuggets of stuff they establish in this movie. You can run with a thread of Michael Keaton's Batman. You can bring back Supergirl. And even if you don't literally use Ezra Miller, you should continue a version of Barry Allen that maintains this energy, because he's a delightful version of the character. I look forward to seeing this again, genuinely.
Oh, me too.
That's the real bar to pass for me.
Baby, it felt good to talk about a movie again with you.
Yeah.
It did. But that's not all we have coming up. We have a retrospective on the Jurassic Park franchise that'll be coming up soon. Mama's favorite movie. Can't deny it. Stay subscribed. Keep that bell on. If you're new, welcome. Hi. Thank you for joining us. Follow us at Champs on Film, both here on YouTube and on Instagram. You can also follow us individually on our respective handles on both Twitter and Letterboxd.
Thank you.
All this talking making me hungry.
What?
Hungry.
Great.